Hi guys, and welcome to this week's video. Well, sorry there wasn't a video last week, but I was so crazy busy at work that I didn't really have very much free time. Well, today's video is a video on managing ebooks on unRAID, and this video will cover the install and setup of two Docker containers, Calibre and Cops. Let's get started. So, you used to have a small ebook collection on your computer with just a few books, and now maybe it's grown and it's more than just a few, and so it's time to look for some software to manage it. Because we have software that manages our movie and TV collection, such as MB or Plex. So for ebook management, in steps Calibre. So what is Calibre and what can it do? Well, Calibre's been around for a while now, 10 years, so it's a mature piece of software that will manage all of our ebooks with a database. It can download metadata and cover art for our existing books, so this means we can not only search our collection by author, type or publisher, etc., but also display it in a nice way. With Calibre, we can also convert our ebooks from one format to another, so we can use them on all of our ebook reading devices. But that's not all. Calibre can actually get us things to read itself. It downloads stories from the BBC, the New York Times, National Geographic and Wired magazine, just to mention a few, so it's a really powerful piece of software. But we're going to take Calibre one step further. We're also going to add Cops to Calibre. Now Cops is a content server, and yes, Calibre has its own content server, but Cops is very lightweight and the preferred choice by many people. So that's what we'll use, and we'll set Cops to be able to manage multiple Calibre libraries in case you have more than one, and also set up Cops to be able to email ebooks straight to any device where we can receive email. So before we start and install a Calibre Docker container, we need to take a look at where our ebooks are now and think of where we want to store our Calibre library. Personally, I like to have a share, especially for ebooks, just for ease of use, but another good place would be as a subdirectory in your media share. Now, one thing to keep in mind is Calibre will not just use your existing ebook collection as it is. So what it will do when you add a book is to copy it to the correct folders inside the Calibre location and then add the information into Calibre's database. So with this in mind, when in a moment we map our folders to the Calibre Docker template, I think it a good idea to add an additional mapping to the download share. That way, any downloaded ebooks can easily be added as they're downloaded. So now I'm just going to go to where I keep my ebooks, and I have a separate share for that called ebooks. And this is also where I want to keep my Calibre library. So let's have a look at that share on the computer. And you can see here I've already got a folder called unsorted, and that's where some ebooks are. But I'm going to create a separate folder in this share just for the Calibre library, and I'm going to call it, of course, Calibre Library. Okay, so I have everything I need on the server, so let's install the container, and to do that, as always, we're going to use Community Applications. Now, if you can't see the Apps tab, that means that you don't have Community Applications installed, and to install it is really easy. All you have to do is to click onto Plugins and then click Install Plugin and then paste this URL in here. Now this URL you can also find in the description, and then you just click onto Install. So having clicked on the Apps tab, let's do a search for Calibre. And you can see here there are a few different versions of Calibre, but the one I'm going to use is AppTalker's RDP Calibre. So let's click on the hard drive icon to install and configure the template. Now for this one we're going to have to change the basic view to advanced view, and then let's scroll down and see which things we can configure. And clicking on show more settings, we can see that by default Calibre stores all of its settings in the app data folder. While this is okay for some people, we're going to have to make some changes and add our own paths. So click on add another path port or variable, and we're going to add a path called library, and this is where our Calibre library is going to be stored. So name it library, and for container path we're going to call it /library, and for the host path I'm going to browse to my ebooks share, and then I'm going to select the Calibre library, that folder that I created earlier, And so now all of my Calibre library is going to be in that folder in my ebook share. So then click on to add. Okay, and so next I'm going to add a path to go to our download share. So for this, call it downloads, and for the container path we want to make it /downloads, and the host path we just want to browse to wherever our download share is. And by adding this share, basically we can add ebooks if we download them in the future. Right, a couple more things to add. Again, click on to add path, port or variable, and this time we're going to add a variable. And for this we're going to call the key here, I'm going to paste in library internal path, and also the name I'm going to paste in the same library internal path, and the value is going to be /library, and that's basically the path that we added earlier. So what this does is basically allow us to set the default path for the Calibre library to be that location. Now that's actually enough paths added for Calibre to work. But if you have some ebooks stored elsewhere on the server and you want to add them to Calibre, then we need to make sure they're accessible from the container. Now my ebooks were in a share called ebooks and then in a folder called unsorted. Now I did map my Calibre library to ebooks and then the Calibre library folder inside, but this mapping won't be able to get to the unsorted folder inside ebooks. So I'm just going to make a separate mapping to the container path /existing ebooks to the ebook share on its own. And now you'll just map to wherever your ebooks are stored on your server. Now if we click apply now, it won't download the container because we haven't filled in the container ports. Now these aren't filled in because these port numbers are really commonly used ports. So we need to basically check first that no other Docker containers are using these ports. And to do that, we just need to scroll down to the bottom and click on Show Deployed Host Ports. And as you can see, port 8080 and 8081 are being used by different Docker containers. So I'm going to need to choose different port numbers. Now changing the port number in the template doesn't affect the port number in the container. So I'm going to choose 9080, which will map through to 8080 in the container. And I'm going to choose 9081, which will map through to 8081 in the container. So what this does is just map unRAID's ports through to these container ports for these particular port numbers. Okay, so with our ports set, now I can click on apply and it will pull down the container. Okay, and once unRAID's pulled down that container, let's scroll down and then right click RDP Calibre and then click on Web UI. And then we want to click onto OK. And now the first thing we want to do is change where the Calibre library is, because we changed some mappings to support that. So click on to change, and then click onto computer, and then go onto this / icon, and then if we scroll down through here, we'll see the folder called library, and that's the mapping we chose. So let's click on choose for that. And then we can click onto next, and here we choose what type of ebook reader we have. Now although we can't actually plug in our ebook reader into unRAID and it transfer books onto it, it is important to select the correct type of device that we use, because when we actually transfer books from format to format, it will actually optimize it for that type of device. So it's worth setting it up correctly. Okay, so this is the Calibre Web UI, and you can see there's already one book inside of here, which is the quick user guide. And if I open up my ebooks folder again and we look in the Calibre library, you can see here that there's a metadata folder, which is the database, and also the folder where that book is. Anyway, I don't really want the quick guide in my library, so I'm going to right click, go to remove books and then click remove selected books, click OK, and then it will delete that out of my library. And so now I'm going to add one of my existing ebooks, a book that I do want. So for that I'm going to click add book and then click computer, then the / icon, and here's the folder I mapped called existing books. I'm just going to choose a random book from here, and you can see here this book's a PDF and it doesn't have a proper title, but it will import it anyway. And that's now copying that book and putting it into my library. And if we have a quick look back in the actual library on the computer, you can see here there's a folder with the author's name and then the title of the book, and then basically the cover, the metadata and other bits inside there. So Calibre basically copies the ebooks over from your existing source, and it sorts them properly, puts them into the correct folders and makes them all neat and tidy. Okay, so now let's add another ebook, and this time I'm going to add a different ebook that's in a RAR format. So Calibre, with a RAR file, it will actually extract it, take the book out and do exactly the same, copy it over. You can see here again the title isn't correct, it's just like a random file name, but it will read this and pull it over into my library. Now you may find sometimes that you need to actually edit the metadata of a book, so for that you just highlight the book and then click on to edit metadata. And you can see here that everything isn't known, like the author is unknown. So what we need to do is click on download metadata, and then Calibre will search online and try and find that book. And you can see here it's found the book that I've got. So all I need to do is click on to OK, and then it will download various covers. And I can, if there's a different cover, I could choose a different cover, but the one I've got is absolutely fine. So I can just click on to OK, and now you can see that the author's filled in and the other metadata is complete. So we can click on to OK. Now if you remember in the introduction, I said that Calibre can download its own things, and so for that we click on to Fetch News. And then we're presented with the list of languages and regions, and I'm going to choose English UK. And then we can choose one of the various news sources or magazines from here. I'm going to choose Macworld UK. And then to make it automatically download, we need to click Schedule for download. And you can see here it says it's last downloaded never. And then we can choose which day of the week we want it to download on. And for me, I'm going to choose, I think, Tuesday. That's as good a day as any. And you can click on Save to save the schedule, or if you want to download it straight away now, we just click Download Now. So I'm going to do that. So Calibre's now downloading that from Macworld UK and turning it into an ebook. You can see it's being processed at the moment because of the jobs icon spinning in the bottom right hand corner. And there we have it, it's been turned into an ebook and it's downloaded into the library. And because we have a schedule set up for that, it will download it every week on a Tuesday. Okay, so let's look at this feature here, Get Books. Now if we click onto this icon, it gives us the facility to be able to search for both paid books and for free books. So first let's start looking for a free book. These are all the different places you can search for your books. I'm going to click on Select None, and I'm going to choose one of the free bookstores there are. I'm going to choose Many Books here, and I'm going to search for William Shakespeare and click Search. Okay, you can see here the complete works of Shakespeare. If I click onto that, and then I can right click and click on to download. So if I click that, and then it shows the various different formats that are available from this source. So I'm going to click OK. And we can see here at the bottom it says there's one job being processed. So let's close this now, and then we should see this appear in our library. Okay, and so there it is, the complete works of Shakespeare's been downloaded. So let's go back and now look at how we get a paid book. So if we click on to Get Books, now this time I'm going to click Select None. I'm just going to choose the Amazon UK Kindle store, and I'm going to search for Game of Thrones. And click Search, and we can see there's various books that have come up here. But if we click on one of these books and right click, we don't get the option to download, we can only go into the store. Now this isn't going to work at the moment. If I click Go into Store, nothing's going to happen. So we're going to have to fix this. And to do that, we're going to have to bash into the container. So let's SSH into our unRAID server. Okay, and it's really easy to bash into a container if you've watched my previous video on how to bash into a Docker container. If you followed that video before, all you have to do is type docker-shell, and we can see here that number 8 is RDP Calibre, so I'm just going to type number 8. Okay, so we're in. So the first thing to type is apt-get and then update, and now we want to type apt-get install and then Firefox, and then yes. Okay, and so now Firefox is installed into the container, so we can close this and go back into Calibre. And now what we've just done is we've installed Firefox as an external browser, so we can click onto this here, and now we can right click and then click Go to Store, and it will open the store within our Firefox browser. And so then if you wanted to buy the book, you just go through the normal process of buying an ebook and buy it and download it from there. Now if you ever update the container, either by clicking Force Update or an update comes down, then the Firefox won't be there. So every time you update the container, if you want to use this feature, then you are going to have to install it every time. Okay, so let's close this. So now let's look at how we can send an ebook from Calibre to our ebook reader using email. And for that we click on Connect and Share, and then set up email-based sharing of books. And in this section we can fill in the outgoing mail server settings for our email account, or what I think is easier is to click on the Use GMX and set up a free GMX account for use with Calibre. And because we've installed Firefox into the container, we can do it straight from inside Calibre. So you just fill in your details here, and I've already created my own account already. So once you've actually created your account, there's one thing just to check. Click onto email settings and then go to POP3 and IMAP, and make sure send and receive emails via external program is checked, and then we can send emails from inside Calibre. So next we just want to put in the email address that we just created, and of course the username and password. And remember, your username is basically just the email address. And then, having set up the sending email server, let's just click test and check it works. And let's pop in an email address to send an email to. I'm just going to use the same one that I'm using now, and just click test. And you should say it says mail successfully sent. Okay, that's the sending server set up. Now click add email, and we're going to have to put in the email address which we have on our e-reader, so Calibre knows where to send the ebooks to. So just pop in the email address you want the ebook sent to, and I'm going to untick auto send here. Then just click on to apply and close, and then to email a book we just right click it, go to connect and share, and then email to the email address we set up earlier, and just click onto that. And you can see in the bottom here it says jobs 1 and the circular spinning things going, and now that's done it should be sent to the email address. So I'm just going to quickly check it's there. Okay, good, that's come through successfully. If this was on my e-reader I could just open the email and then I could download the attachment and read it on the device. So next we're going to look at setting up the content server in Calibre. Now we're going to do this in Calibre using its own server, but we're also going to do it in Cops, which is a very popular lightweight server which works with Calibre databases. So first let's set it up in Calibre. So let's click on the Connect Share icon here, and then go to Start Content Server. And as you can see here, an error comes up saying that port 8080 is already in use. Now if you remember when we set up the template, we mapped through two different ports to the container, and they were 8080 and 8081. Now 8081 is actually the content server, so all we need to do is just change that in the settings. So let's click OK here and go to our preferences, and then click on sharing over the net, and then we need to go onto the port which listens for connections and just click that to 8081. Now even if we've changed the mapping in the template, it has to be 8081 because our mapping still goes through to this container port. So now click on to apply and OK. And now when we click on Connect and Share and we go to Start Content Server, we can see we don't get an error. And so now I'm going to go back to my Docker tab on unRAID, and you can see here my 8081 is mapped across to 9081 on my server. So if I just click on that there, it opens up the Calibre content server, and then I just click onto my library button here, and you can see here, here's my books. Now I find the downloading of books works fine from this server, but when you click on read it doesn't really work very well. Well, not for me anyway, maybe you'll have a lot better luck. But for me, when I click read, it just doesn't format things very well and the controls don't really work very well. So I'm going to go back into Calibre and just stop Calibre's content server. Right, so now let's close Calibre and stop the container. And let's install another content server. Let's install Cops. So again we go back to Community Applications and type in Cops. And let's click on to the hard drive icon to install. Okay, so the first thing to change is the container port here. Now we can change this to a different port other than 80, because port 80 will be the same port that our unRAID web UI is using. So we can either change this to another port, but what I prefer to do is actually change the IP address that the container is running in. Now to do this, you just click onto the network type and choose BR0, and then you should see your subnet here, and mine is 10.10.20.0/24. So I'm going to put an IP address in my range here. I'm going to use 10.10.20.189. So that's where the container will run from. And here where it says container path /books, this is where our Calibre library is. So for me, that was in ebooks and then Calibre library. So just select where your library is and then just click on to apply. And that will pull the container down. Okay, and so now we just have to click onto Cops and then go to Web UI, and you can see here at the top the 189 IP address it's running from, and it's logged into my Calibre database. So if I click onto the bottom here, the 50 most recent books, here are all my books. And if your book's in EPUB format, you can click onto the I button here, which is the reader, where you can read the book from. And this reader is a far more competent reader than the built-in one in the Calibre content server. Also here you can download the books in the various formats that you have them. And if you click onto this button here, you can actually send it by email, just the same as in Calibre itself. But obviously we need to configure a few things before we can do that. And what we're going to do, we'll look at the settings that we have here first to customize Cops. The first thing we can put in here is the email address that we want to have Cops be able to send our books to. So just pop in the email address that you have on your e-reader. Now any other changes we have to do in the configuration file, which is in our app data folder. Now we can actually add more than one Calibre database to Cops, which can be useful for some people. And also we do that from the configuration file as well. Right, so let's just go back to our desktop a moment, and here's my ebooks folder here, and you can see here now, here's my original Calibre library, but I've also created a second Calibre library here. So what I'm going to do is go back to the Cops template and click onto edit here, and so here we can see we've got the container path /books. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make another path, and I'm just going to call it books2. And for the container path, I'm going to call it /books2. And for the host path, I'm going to go to my ebooks folder and just to that folder called Calibre Library 2 that I showed you a moment ago. And so now this extra mapping here is going to the second Calibre database. So if you have 3 or 4 databases, just make a mapping to each individual one. And then click apply. And that will update the container. Now what we need to do is we need to go to our app data folder now, and in here you'll find the folder called Cops, and it's this file here, the config_local.php, which stores our other config settings for Cops. So open it with a text editor. Now if you're using Windows, then please use something like Notepad++, just so the line endings are correct. If you use the regular Notepad in Windows, it can make things go wrong. I'm using a Mac and I'm going to use TextMate to edit this. And this is our config file here. Now the first thing we can see here, this is where our Calibre library is. And you can see here it's set for /books and then a / at the end. So this is the mapping that we have earlier. So we're going to change this. So just delete out where it says =books and then have =array space, then open brackets, space, and then speech marks, and then the title of what you want that Calibre database to be called. I'm going to call mine main, and then close the speech marks, and then space, and then equals, greater than, space, and then in speech marks again. Now we need to have the location of the Calibre database. Now this location obviously is the mapping inside of the container. So here we need to have the first one, which is /books, and then we need to put a / at the end, and then close speech marks, and then if we put a comma, then we can add another location. So for this one I'm going to call it sub, again in speech marks, and then a space, equals, greater than, and then in speech marks, and then a / and then books 2. And that's that second mapping we've just made. And then another /. So then we close the brackets and just put a semicolon at the end. And now this second line here, we just want to delete this. We don't want to leave that in else it won't work. So just delete this line here. And that's multiple directories set up for Cops. But while we're in the configuration, let's scroll down to the bottom here and set up our sending email server details. Now I'm going to use the same email address that I used in the Calibre server, so I'm going to use the GMX one that I set up. So I'm going to just delete this out here and paste this in here. And now just to go through this, the SMTP host for me is mail.gmx.com, and I've had to put this extra line in here for use with GMX, which specifies the port number, which is 587. And the username is the email address, and the password is whatever your password is. And we need to have the smtp.secure to equal TLS, well that's if you're using GMX of course, and the address from, make sure you set that to your email address that you're sending from, otherwise it probably won't work. Okay, so that's all we need to do, so everything now should hopefully work. So now we can save this file and go back to Cops. Okay, so now when we start up Cops and go to Web UI, you can see here we've got two different databases. So here's the main one with 4 books in, which is the one we were looking at before. And here's my other database here, which has just got 1 book in it. And if I click onto this book here, I can download it. And if I click onto the email symbol here, that will send me the book. Right, so that's Cops and Calibre all set up. It was a long video, but there was a lot to cover. If I've forgotten anything or you have any tips for using this software, then please leave your comments below. And I'd just like to take a moment to thank Stephen Stevens for sponsoring me to make this video on Calibre and ebooks, and I hope it helps you get your ebook collection set up on unRAID. Anyway guys, so that's me done, so now I'm off to watch the new series 2 of Stranger Things. I really hope it's going to be as good as the first one. And please, if you like this video and found this video useful, then please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And I really hope whatever you're up to for the rest of the day it's good, and I'll catch you in another video.